This is Death in Ice Valley, an original podcast series from the BBC World Service and NRK.
The Isdal Woman took her secrets to the grave after a life undercover came to a tragic end. Whether she ended up there by her own hand or through the actions of an organization, a question mark hangs over that grave.
I'm Neil McCarthy.
And I'm Marit Higraff.
And this is episode 10, Underground.
This is the last episode in the series.
And we've still got some important leads to follow up in this podcast. But just thinking back to where we began, or where I began, on that bleak hillside outside Bergen, at the scene where the woman was found in 1970. So difficult to find that spot. It's etched on my memory, the rain falling, and such a lonely, lonely place.
I've been there several times, and every time we had slight problems finding the exact spot where she was found. But I've heard that now there is a path leading to the place, a path made by people going there after we started this podcast series.
The word really has got out there. But also, you've been living with the Isdal Woman's story longer than I have. I mean, how far has she got under your skin?
Oh, this has been so intense, this work, trying to get closer to the truth in this story. So, of course, it has done something to me. I find myself thinking about her and asking myself questions all the time. It was a situation yesterday, actually. I'm staying in hotel rooms all the time, every time I come here to London, and this time I stay in a rather old hotel in Soho, and the room is a very nice room, but with old handmade furniture, and I have a big desk in there, and it just struck me yesterday that it might be like her hotel rooms back then.
Yeah, it was one of those frozen in time rooms, so you could have been in the Neptune or the Hordeheimer.
Yeah.
And the desk, were you tempted to put the desk against the door for any reason?
No, I had no reason to do that, but my boss suggested me to sit down on the desk and write some poetry.
In code? So we've come a long way from that cold hillside and those many hotel rooms, and we're not finished yet. Last time we got word about the spoon that was found in the Isdal Woman's suitcase. On closer inspection of the police report, listing all the items inside, we saw some detail about an inscription on the spoon that we'd missed.
We've done some research and had a few hits on the engraving, which was an SCH underlined and a P underneath. We found some references to a Norwegian shipping company which had those initials, but it was written differently. But remember, the letters on her spoon were inside a heart.
Another search gave us some more interesting hits. The letters SCHP seem to be a common abbreviation for a religious order called the Piarists, who are Catholics, an order with an emphasis on education. Maybe they had a heart around the letters, as a heart is a common Catholic symbol.
Well, we've been in touch with the order, both at their headquarters in Rome and at other locations, but they knew nothing about any spoon or other cutlery with an inscription like the one described.
Strange to be carrying a spoon with a Catholic symbol if she was Jewish. There was also a picture of the Madonna with child in her suitcase. Maybe it was all part of her disguise.
Then, during another online search, we found something unexpected, a bit closer to home. We are now 2 hours drive north of Oslo, outside a museum. And colleague Øyvind, tell, what brought us here?
The hits brought us here to this museum. It's actually a forest museum within the forests in the inland of Norway. And they have something that might be similar.
We are looking for a fork and a knife, which is in our collection, and it has belonged to an old couple in the Røros area. Look for the numbers.
This is museum curator Bjørn Bekkelund.
8513 should be this one. A bit rusty.
Does it say something?
There should be a German manufacturer.
It says made in Austria.
Austria. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This seems to be some kind of like butter knife, quite normal.
Quite normal. So I lived in 1970, and I think many people had such forks and knives in their kitchens at that time.
Yeah.
Do we see any inscription on this knife and fork? Can we turn them?
We can turn them.
Yeah, there's
On the fork there's something.
Quite small.
My old eyes can't read it. See now, it says Rostfreier Stahl, German for stainless steel.
In the middle, we have this inscription we are looking for.
Yes.
It's a small heart with the SCH and an underscore and a P.
Yeah, that's right.
But, and there is a but, there is no doubt that this inscription is not made afterward. To me, it says that this is something made by the fabric.
Yes, factory.
Definitely.
And on the knife?
Yes, you got the same heart and the same letters.
We have brought with us the documentation from the police about the contents in the suitcases of this woman.
It says suitcase number 1, and it's object G.
Yeah.
In English, it says it's
smooth or
smooth,
something?
yeah. Steel soup spoon, smooth, with an inscription. Rostfreier Stahl and SCHP
Yeah.
within a heart.
Yeah. It's the same thing.
It definitely seems to be the same.
Yeah. The same manufacturer, I'll say.
Yeah. And so we are not getting any closer here now, but we know then for sure that this must have been made in Austria.
Yes.
So we have
and
to,
must have been sold in Norway, I'll say.
or brought here by somebody
Yes.
traveling
Yeah.
in Austria,
Yeah.
for instance.
Yeah.
Okay, Marit, now I know we got quite excited about the spoon, but I've got a feeling it's not going to be the case-cracking clue we were looking for after all.
Maybe not. But after we went to the museum and after episode 9, the Facebook group has done some amazing research. And that's without even seeing the photos of the engraving we've just posted on the website. We must give special mention to Mike Alexander, who found out that this symbol with the SCHP within a heart was the trademark of a steel company in Vienna, the capital of Austria. It was called Schutz and Patry, and they mass-produced cutlery. So it's unlikely that this spoon had any special sentimental values after all. A bit like the matchbox in the earlier episode, it was an intriguing clue. But in the end, it doesn't tell us anything special about the Isdal Woman. It was worth a try though.
So you found them?
Yes, they were in the safe, number 1 and number 2. The case number 4968, 1970. A means a criminal case.
This case has now gained a lot of international interest. One of the places that feels the effect of this is the State's archives in Bergen.
This says investigations. And if you open this one, we can see that this is the correspondence with the international police.
Its director is Yngve Nedrebø, who was in the city in 1970.
Now, the State's archive in Bergen has a pop star case, and this is the Isdal case, or?
Yes, of course. When we have people coming from halfway around the world to see it, it means that the case has brought on an interest that not much of the things that we keep do have. The most fascinating thing is, of course, that no one has been able to find a solution. So that's annoying. So why wouldn't they be able to find more information about her? Because obviously she stayed for quite some time. She had a lot of people probably that she met someone is not telling everything, and so the feeling was that the police hadn't done too good a job. And as I have been in the archive since the early 1970s, there have been so many people coming here, and everyone was very optimistic, and everyone said that I will find a solution. And no one until you came.
Well, we might have got closer, but we're not there yet.
This feeling he talks about, that the police didn't do their investigation well, it's an interesting one. Do you think it's fair?
Well, there were teams of officers working on it, and they did a thorough investigation. We know because of all the documents they produced and all the interviews they did.
You've been through everything.
Yes. And the National Criminal Intelligence Police came quickly to Bergen from Oslo, as we know. And then the case was suddenly officially closed after only 3 intensive weeks, and that's a bit confusing. There are no senior police officers still alive who worked on the case, but here is Tore Osland. He's the son of Harald Osland, who led the investigation on behalf of the Bergen police.
My father was investigating murder and rape in Western Norway, always when he was at the police in Bergen. When that case came, then day after day there was new things that happened. I was much home at that time, and he told me something about what happened. But later on, when I asked him what happened there and what happened there, what was it like? Why didn't you go to Geneva? Why didn't you go to Paris to follow up tracks after the Isdal Woman?
Do you remember some of the things he told you?
Yes, I remember very well that he was surprised that the Kripos, the Norwegian intelligence service and Kripos, they came to Bergen the day after this happened, which was something that he almost couldn't believe, because they never was that interested in what happened in the outskirts of Norway.
So there was a feeling passed on to Tore Osland from his father that his father's hands seemed to be tied in some way. He couldn't carry out the investigation the way he wanted to.
No, obviously his father was quite frustrated about not being able to follow up leads that he wanted to follow up. I mean, going abroad to check up on things, and they were obviously stopped from doing that.
And then when the case is suddenly shut down, I can imagine it would leave a lot of local police officers scratching their heads.
Yeah, let's hear what Tore Osland says about that.
He hadn't any good feeling about this case, and that is not alone. I've talked to many policemen afterwards, and they're saying almost the same. I have no good feeling about that case. I have no good feeling about that case.
What do they mean?
And they mean that they hadn't solved the case. The case was solved by the Kripos and the police chief in Bergen, saying that this was a suicide, and it seemed like she had an accident and got herself burned. The policeman working on the case accepted that it's like that, like policemen, I suppose, always do. Mm-hmm. But then what I said afterwards was that I didn't have a good feeling about that case, which means that they didn't accept that it was a suicide. None of them. None of them I've spoken to.
So local police officers didn't have a good feeling about the case and the way it was closed, but they obviously took the case very seriously and showed a lot of respect to the Isdal Woman. I mean, they were the only people who attended her funeral in February 1971.
Yes, there's a photograph of them at the graveside. They really look like they care about the woman being buried. Gunnar Ståle, Bergen's most famous crime writer, took us to the spot where this photo was taken.
She's lying here. As you know, it's an unmarked grave. This you can see is the typical Bergen bush. It's a rhododendron, and they grow very fast and very high. So it's an unmarked grave. I don't think anybody really bothers about this place. And she was put down here because in 1971, when she was buried, they still had hope of finding her family in the near future, so that she could eventually be brought home to her original country and buried again there.
And that was the reason for this zinc coffin?
Yeah, so she is still preserved down there, I hope.
A real mystery to the end, even to her resting place. You can't even see it.
Yeah, it's only because of this old photo that we could identify it, and of course there are some people in Bergen who has known all the time that it was here.
That is my father.
Tore Osland again.
But that's all policemen standing at the coffin.
Yeah, this is the burial.
Yeah, very serious. It looks like there are kind of sorrow there.
It's a very somber mood. Yeah, so we're graveside. The coffin is being lowered into the grave.
Yeah.
It's a white, beautiful white, ornate coffin with handles on the side and a sort of design around the edge and with flowers on top. You've got the priest on one end in a sort of frock, white frock. And there are about 15, mostly men around the grave.
Yeah, 2 female detectives too. I remember them. This was the chief of police in Bergen.
What a unique funeral and burial. I can't imagine there were many like that.
This is a very unusual picture. I never saw a picture like this. But the reason was that she had no relatives, and the only relative she had was the policeman that worked on the case.
The evidence and witness testimony we've gathered suggests that she was involved with espionage, either as an agent or as a courier taking information to or from an agent. But we still haven't managed to pin down which organisation or intelligence service she worked for. Professor Stephen Dorrell of Huddersfield University is an expert in the field of Western counterintelligence.
You have been following our series. What's your personal theory on the case?
Picking up all the bits and pieces of information, my first thought was that this was Mossad, which is the Israeli intelligence agency. They were operating in the late 60s, 70s, infiltrating far-right groups, infiltrating the PLO, etc. And they used agents who did have different identities. This particular woman, I mean, it's pure speculation, but she came from Germany, I believe, that she was maybe part of the post-war refugee problem, or could have been, and maybe, I don't know, maybe she was Jewish. So that was my first thought. And the one agency that is capable of doing this kind of operation, of running somebody with multiple identities, because they did it, was Mossad. It's a shame we don't know the passports, because Mossad did a great deal about passports. They stole passports, forged passports, used passports from different countries. And they used agents who did use different identities, and they did recruit more females than I think most intelligence agencies.
Can you speculate as to what a Mossad agent might have been doing in Norway at that time?
That's the difficult part. Supporters of the Palestinians were across Europe. So that's a possibility. They had agents in different places. They were tracking former Nazis, war criminals. They were still doing that. They were also out to get opponents of Israel, and they engaged in assassinations of people from different organizations. So, there's a number of possibilities.
So no one's mentioned Mossad before?
Well, actually, there was a big scandal involving Mossad in Norway in 1973. A year before, a Palestinian group called Black September took 11 members of the Israeli team hostage at the Munich Olympics in Germany and killed them.
It has been possible to hear what sounded like automatic gunfire, and there's been a great deal of police and military traffic in and out of the camp. Soon after the helicopters arrived from Munich, a convoy of police cars drove into the airfield, and armed guards with Alsatian dogs came out and started patrolling the barbed wire perimeter. Within minutes it had been reported that one or more of the Arab gunmen had escaped.
Mossad agents then came to the Norwegian town of Lillehammer and assassinated a man called Ahmed Bouchiki, a Moroccan waiter who they suspected of being involved in the massacre. He wasn't. They killed the wrong person, and then they got caught before they managed to leave the country. So they were imprisoned in Lillehammer, and it was a big story about that.
So Mossad did have a history in Norway. Black September was one of a number of radical groups which emerged in the early 1970s and kicked off violent campaigns in Europe. Many of these groups were disillusioned with the response to student movement demands in 1968 and the often violent reactions of the state. So they moved from methods of direct action to armed struggle, which included acts of terrorism. They saw their struggle as supporting similar groups which had developed in the post-colonial world as part of an eruption of nationalism and anti-imperialism, and many supported the Palestinians and the Palestinian Liberation Organization, the PLO. There was the Red Brigade in Italy, the Red Army faction and the Baader-Meinhof group in Germany, and the IRA in Ireland. Their aims and methods varied across Europe, but at their heart was a belief, rightly or wrongly, that democracy was something of a sham and that states were perfectly willing to use violence to support it. Terrorism was seen as the means to expose this. This is something we haven't considered either. We've been thinking about her working for a state intelligence agency in some way, but could the Isdal Woman have been mixed up with these groups, working as some kind of operative or courier?
The Red Army faction, Baader-Meinhof, started post-1968, and they were looking for weapons, they were looking for support, but they didn't really get sophisticated or organised again until the early 1970s, when they did have some contact with the Soviets, but more particularly with the East Germans. But the East German connection comes in a bit later. There were connections with the PLO and the Middle East, attempts to get arms through there, and they did require identities, they did require passports and those kind of things. But again, I think this particular incident is just too early for that. There are other terrorist groups throughout Europe, and the IRA, but I can't think of an instance where they've done anything like this. And there are other groups in Europe, but again, I think this is 1970, and it's just a bit too early for speculation that these groups had some involvement with her or she was part of that.
Thousands of you have made comments on our Facebook group over the course of this series, offering theories and raising questions.
It's been great to follow the conversations, and we've been overwhelmed by the response. And we wanted to try and answer a few of those questions and share some of the theories. Quite a few of you were asking whether the Isdal Woman was pregnant or whether she'd ever had children, whether that was ever known.
We know from the autopsy report that this was a woman who had never given birth.
Yeah, and that also showed that she wasn't pregnant at the time she died.
And then a lot of you have mentioned the story of the Somerton man, the Somerton case. This is an unsolved case in Australia about an unidentified body found with the labels cut off its clothes. But from all we've seen, the two cases are not connected at all. But yeah, there are similarities.
People are asking whether we checked missing persons reports in Belgium and other European countries that she may have come from. And yes, the police asked Interpol to check this with the member countries on their databases and didn't get any positive results.
Many of you are suggesting that this could be a woman mentally ill in some way or another, that there are things by her behavior that suggests that she was quite paranoid, fleeing from something. Maybe she had some kind of mental illness. Yeah, I'm not a psychiatrist, but to me it's too much with her behavior showing that this was a person having control. She was pretty organized. I mean, the way she traveled and so.
She was highly organized, that's true. But you just don't know if she was being pursued at that point, whether it was fear or stress or depression or loneliness. It's hard to say. But Professor Stephen Dorrell has looked at mental health in connection with the lives of spies, and he has some thoughts on this.
It is entirely possible that somebody, maybe if it's somebody who's been doing this for some time, just becomes totally depressed by what they're doing. Where does it go? Is this the end of the road? I'm a Freudian, so I always think that these kind of things come out in the end in different forms, that you can't keep this stuff secret. It will leak out. That might be internally that you end up because of the pressures of keeping up all these multiple identities, of the travel, of basically lying to people over a long time, and maybe you just can't live with that and you end it.
Also because maybe you live a very lonely life.
That's my feeling about this, that this maybe is a lonely person. It does seem quite a lonely life. Keep travelling, going to different places, not being able to have any long-term relationships. I mean, one of the things with my work is probably 2 or 3 times a year somebody will contact me and say, could you tell me about my father? We think he worked in intelligence, but we don't know. And it is the case that there are intelligence personnel who never tell their family what they actually do. It's only when they die that they discover, in fact, they worked in intelligence. They knew they went off on trips abroad, but they didn't know it was intelligence work. Maybe they become suspicious. And it is a kind of, well, obviously a very secretive, lonely life.
We had an interesting theory in from Will Salkeld. He says, I just noticed that each of the identities the Isdal Woman used, if written or typed in block capitals in a passport, for example, could easily have been modified or altered into the next with minimal erasing, and mostly by adding straight lines. Tealt becomes Nielsen easily. Alexia becomes Vera. Zarna becomes Jarla. Also, Fenella Lork becomes Lienhofer by simple, clumsy modification. Try it with pen and paper and you will see.
Many of you have been asking if her DNA can prove whether the Isdal Woman was Jewish or not. I put this to our DNA expert, Professor Walter Passen in Innsbruck.
First of all, we need to appreciate that we are using 2 different contexts here. The genetic context and then an ethnic or ethnological context.
The question is complicated, but essentially the answer is no. You can't prove it with any reliability.
And this is why tests to predict the Jewish ancestry of individuals are subject to error depending on the result that is retrieved with such a case.
Some of you are asking who else was staying at the same hotels as the Isdal Woman in Norway and whether they could throw light on her story. Maybe her contacts or accomplices stayed there too.
Well, the police collected all hotel registration cards in 1970. There are 9 boxes of them at the State's Archive in Bergen. But again, it didn't lead to anything.
We had quite a few theories around whether the Isdal Woman was an art smuggler and was she dealing in stolen artwork. Here's one. Maybe she was buying the mirror for its frame or to smuggle a flat canvas behind the mirror. The scalpel in her bag may have been used to cut the canvas artwork out of frames to roll up in the metal canister. It seems she travelled to many cities that are connected to the art world. We know there was a lot of artwork stolen in World War I and World War II. Was she employed as a courier?
There's been plenty of discussions about whether the sleeping pills were taken by the Isdal Woman voluntarily or if she could have been forced to take them. We put this to our intelligence expert, Stephen Doyle, again.
I've certainly heard of cases where barbiturates have been stuffed down the throat of a person to make it look as if they committed suicide. And I can think of one particular case where somebody told me that they did that it was made to look like a suicide, and that they actually injected this person but also stuffed barbiturates down his throat.
So the sleeping pills could point us in different directions: suicide and murder.
Back to Gunnar Stålesen, our companion in our search for the Isdal Woman's shadow in Bergen.
I have followed this case from when the woman was found in Isdal, the ice valley, in 1970. From time to time I have refreshed my opinions on it, but I must say that during the last years, when NRK started their series, and not at least in this period when there's been an international podcast in cooperation with BBC that has really made this case known all over the world. I'm still traveling in some countries as a crime writer, and when I meet people this last year, everybody is talking about this case. So this is really a world mystery now, and it is a fascinating story. I think the big breakthrough was that one found her DNA, and also the isotope researches of her teeth. Because what we have now is a possibility to identify her through some relatives, if one would find them. And I think, too, that what we have learned, we are quite certain, as I understand it, that she was born somewhere in Germany, that she went to school in France, and that she was a little bit older than one had thought earlier. And for me, as a writer, I used to use my imagination to solve mysteries that I have created myself, but also that other people have written. I can see a quite possible picture of who this woman was. If I should put it in some words, born in Germany around 1930, 3 years old or something like that when Hitler got into power in 1933. The family thought that they would leave the country because of that, perhaps because they were Jews. And they went to the closest neighbor country, which is France, where she went to school. And more than that, I understand we cannot still find from what we have about her DNA and the isotope researches. But after that, we know that there is a woman who is found dead in Norway in 1970. And one of the theories that many of us have had is that she had some connection with Israeli Secret Service. I myself have proposed once that perhaps she was searching for old Nazi people in Norway, or perhaps coming from Germany to Norway at the point. The other solution or other theory is that she was searching for Arab terrorists, which the Secret Service of Israel did very clearly 2 years after, in 1972, when there was a killing in Lillehammer. And one could imagine that all her family was killed in a concentration camp during the war. She is the sole survivor and would be very, if not easy, she would be possible to be part of Israeli Secret Service after the war. This, of course, is just a crime writer's imagination working on what we know, but I still think that this is not perhaps the real truth, but it might be part of the truth.
Well, we have come a long way. We haven't found her yet, but she does feel nearer to us than when we started, doesn't she?
Yes, and I will not give up now after 2 years of this project. So definitely we will continue to look into the leads we have.
Yeah, we've amassed so much evidence, so much testimony, talked to so many witnesses. We've built up this picture of her, the way she moved, her life. And yet, despite all these clues and possibilities, her story does still feel like water. It just sort of slips through your fingers. I still don't know who she really is.
Yes, and I still haven't given up hope on bringing her back something that she has lost, and that is a name and a dignity.
It's such a tragic tale, and it's somebody who, despite our best efforts, we haven't found anyone who knows her now, and no one came forward who knew her then. You know, maybe this was a woman who just lived a life, a solitary existence. She had her contacts, she met them, she passed information, but she was the lone wolf in her world. And who knows, when things seemed to unravel at the end, and whether she was killed or she took her own life, it just felt like everything was just falling apart around her. Her identity started to slip, or just everything she kept together managed to fall away, and her life went with it. But I think it's a very sad story, and I also would love to bring back her true identity and to memorialise her properly. I think from the feedback we've been getting, more people care about her now than ever cared about her then. But I still stand by what we said at the very beginning. Someone out there still knows who she was. Whether they were a family member or an associate, somebody has the answer for us.
I think so too. Somebody knows something about her and what happened to her. And I still hope that person or those persons makes contact with us to help us solve this case.